Welcome to my video today. We are going to be learning how to make the dough for my sweet Hawaiian sourdough sandwich loaf. Let's get started. All right, here are the ingredients that you're going to need to make your sweet Hawaiian sourdough sandwich loaf. Some ingredients are optional, but others are not. Now, first I'm going to start with 1.5 cups of pineapple juice. Next, I'm going to add 3/4 of a cup of milk. I will then add 2 eggs. Note that this loaf is what is called an enriched dough because it contains eggs, milk, and butter. Fourth, I'm going to add a splash of vanilla, just a sploosh. We make our own vanilla and we love it. Next, we're going to add 3/4 of a cup of sugar. Notice I'm using 1/4 of a cup to measure this out. I do this because I use the same measuring cup to measure out my sourdough starter. Before I mix in the sourdough starter, however, I like to give it a good mix, all of the liquids to incorporate them well together and to kind of mix that sugar and dissolve it into the liquid. Next, I'm going to be adding my sourdough starter, 3/4 of a cup of it. Now, you'll notice my sourdough starter is not runny. It is actually this starter. I like to make very stiff starters, and this starter I made earlier this week, and it has been sitting in my fridge. And the kind of consistency that you want, as you can see, is it is quite solid and stretchy, but it is not powdery. There aren't clumps of flour in it. It is pretty substantial. Now, this is how I like to make my breads to get the best of rises. It doesn't have to be, but it works better when it's like this. Now, next I'm incorporating it into my liquids, and I'm using my fingers here. You can use your Danish whisk, and that's absolutely fine, but I find that using my fingers to break up the thicker starter is a little bit better. Now, this is where I add 1,050 grams of bread flour. This is where the scale is going to come in very handy. Instead of measuring with a measuring cup, I use the weight because you will get a more accurate quantity and therefore have more accurate bread each time that you make it. So if you put a little bit in, just take a little bit out. I like to flatten out my mound a little bit before I add my next ingredients, which will be 6 tablespoons of butter. I use salted Kerrygold butter. You obviously can choose any butter you want, but this is what I use. I've never really put unsalted butter in here, but I also put salt in the dough and it turns out just fine. So I use the salted butter. Now, just as a little note, you're going to see me here in the next section adding my salt. And I actually forgot to add 3 teaspoons of salt. So I'm going to go ahead and make that correction. We have 3 teaspoons of salt that need to go into the dough. Even though I missed 1 teaspoon, I caught it and I was able to go back later on and add my salt to this. Now here's the sunflower lectin. This is optional. You do not have to use it, but it does tend to make more tender bread, and it also makes the longevity of your bread last a little bit longer, at least by week, if keeping it out. With the humidity down here in Southeast Texas, I still like to keep it in the refrigerator, but it does make the bread a lot more tender. Now, as you can see, I am mixing my dough. I'm incorporating my flour and all my dry ingredients with my liquid. Now, you want to incorporate this until there is no more powder at all in the bowl. Like, you don't want to have any more flour or anything that is not worked and incorporated into this wet shaggy dough, which is what we're making, is a shaggy dough. And as you can see, I'm moving the dough around so that way I can get the flour that's still at the bottom, and I'm putting it on top and I'm incorporating it. And this is one of the best ways to do that, to just incorporate it, and you will know that you are done making your shaggy dough whenever there is no more flour in the bottom of your bowl. All right, so I'm doing that. Now we're going to be letting this sit for 30 minutes and to let it auto lace for 30 minutes. In actuality, you could do this longer than 30 minutes. just to let it rest. It helps the gluten develop. You could do 45 minutes to an hour in between stretching and folding. This is my cover I use. You could also, I made this one, I put a liner in it to keep my bread from drying out, but you can also use plastic wrap or saran wrap. Now, it's been 30 minutes and I'm going to do the first stretch and fold. This is very important in getting our bread to actually start forming up into a soft, smooth dough ball, right? And so we're between using time and using the stretching and folding, this helps our gluten develop and grow strong bonds in order to make our bread. So this process, you're going to take the bread and you're going to stretch it up and you're going to fold it over. Now, once the ball gets so tight that you can't really stretch anymore, you start tucking the ball under itself. Okay, we're doing this, it's building tension, and it is also helping build the gluten. Once it is smooth and pretty tight, I just leave it. We're gonna see how tight that is. It's smoother than it was. We're gonna leave it again for 30 minutes. Again, you can leave it for a little bit longer if you need to. And I do recommend, because it is an enriched dough, that you do let it, the longer you let it set and the more stretching and folds you do, the better your product will turn out. Now, as you can see on the second stretch and fold, the dough ball is already so much smoother. We have a lot more stretch. I'm able to pull it up a little bit higher, and this is only by the second stretch and fold. Now I'm to the tucking method, where I'm tucking the dough underneath itself in order to help build that tension in the dough and make the ball a little bit smoother as it auto laces. All right. And again, this is just very important. If you don't have a KitchenAid mixer of any sort, or like a stand mixer of any sort, these steps are very important. It does take time, but it's important. Now, this is after our second stretch and fold. And now we'll wait 30 minutes. And this is the third. Look how far I can get that dough up. It is coming together so well. This is an hour and a half of sitting and stretching in 3 stretches and folds. At this point, it's having its third stretch and fold. Now, keep in mind, as we are doing these stretching and folds, that our dough ball is getting smoother. She's getting more elasticy, and that's exactly what we want. Now, one way that we can test to see whether or not, how well the gluten is developing, how close are we to being done, right, is to do what is called a window pane test. Now, you're going to see me here. I'm going to grab the dough and I'm going to kind of pull it up and stretch it a little bit. And a window pane test, when it's successful, is that you'll be able to stretch it and the dough will not tear apart. And instead, it will make a very thin window pane, is what they call it. So there you go. That's how you get that name. Now, it's been 30 minutes and I'm doing the 4th stretch and fold. Look how high I'm able to stretch this dough up and out. It has gotten so much better after just 3 stretches and folds and going into the 4th one. Now, I will say, if you do have a stand mixer, but maybe it's not a professional quality one, at this point, you could put this dough into a stand mixer and let it finish kneading, and you will be done. But if you do not have any kind of stand mixer, you need to continue to do at least 2 more stretching and folds, at least, until you get a smooth dough ball that can pass the window pane test. Now, I'm about to show you, this dough is done. Look at that window pane. I can pull it up and stretch it, and there's no tearing in my dough. It is ready to do its bulk fermentation. And as you can see, she is nice and smooth. She is ready to go into my plastic container to sit on my counter for 1 to 2 hours before I put her into the fridge for her bulk fermentation. I will normally put her in overnight, but sometimes I will leave her in there 2 to 3 days until I'm ready to shape the loaves.